Hi everybody. I want to talk to you today about what I'll call comparative suffering and finger traps. And we'll get to these in a second. But comparative suffering, so something I'm noticing happening a lot, both in myself and in others, is that when presented with the question, how are you? How are you doing? The answer will go something like this. Well, I'm feeling, and you can fill in the blank, I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling angry or frustrated, but, and there's always a but, and after the but comes, but I feel like I shouldn't feel this way because there's so many other people who have it so much worse than I do. And in that statement, there is this negation of how we're feeling, and a resistance to how we're feeling, a resistance to fully acknowledging how we're feeling. And I think part of that negation is because of the comparative aspect. I think we're all hyper aware right now of both the devastation that's happening in the world and our relative relationship to that. And so there can be a reluctance to fully acknowledge or accept how we're feeling because we feel like we should feel a certain way about it. And then I think the other piece of the resistance is, for some of us, what we're feeling is actually quite painful, and we would just rather not feel it. And so there's a resistance to the suffering that we're feeling. And so that resistance, that's where the finger trap comes in. So the thing about resistance is that, as you'll remember from childhood, when you're in a finger trap and you try to get out of the finger trap and you try to pull away from it and resist it, you only become more tightly entrapped in it. And the same is true for our emotions. So if we're feeling frustrated, but we're like, I don't want to be feeling frustrated right now. I shouldn't be feeling frustrated. Or if we're feeling sad, but it's like, I don't want to feel the sadness. I should be feeling some other way, right? I should be feeling grateful. All we do is tighten the grip that the emotion has on us. And so, as with finger traps, the first thing to do is to just relax that resistance and to acknowledge how it is we're really feeling. And as we start to acknowledge it and become present to what's going on, the tension eases, and we may even be able to get out of the finger trap. And even if we can't get out of the finger trap, generally once we stop resisting what we're feeling, we create a little more space around it, a little more breath, a little more ease, and the degree of suffering, the intensity of the suffering may ease a little bit, and so it can pass a little more smoothly. And so, in the spirit of non-resistance, I wanted to share with you an experience I've been having this week around the same topic. And I'm offering this really just from this place of, from a place of an invitation, an invitation to, all any of us can do is sort of speak sincerely from our own experience. And my hope is that by doing so, I can kind of invite you to explore whatever it is you might be resisting in your life during this time. So yeah, this week. So I had a pretty crappy week, actually. And part of that was I learned out of the blue about the death of a good friend of mine. This is somebody I haven't been in touch with for years, but he's somebody who was quite important to me many years ago. And his death was unexpected, and the news of it like fell out of the sky of the Facebook universe and landed into my news feed. And it was just a complete shock because it was completely unexpected. And I had all the regret of having fallen out of touch and everything that goes with that. And so that was something that, of course, I'm going to feel grief, and of course I'm going to feel real sadness around that. And I was calling that appropriate grief, appropriate sadness, right? So to some degree was allowing for that. But right alongside that, there was also this degree of suffering that I was feeling this week around the passage of time, and sort of looking at this chapter of COVID-19 and being away from work is, suddenly I have all of this abundance of time on my hands, and yet I have nothing to show for it, right? I can't believe how many weeks have passed, and I started to get really tight and tense around accountability. And so it would be Monday, and then it would be Tuesday, and then it would be Friday, and then it would be the next Tuesday. And I felt like time was kind of slipping through my fingers, and was so frustrated that I couldn't get a grip on it, and that I couldn't sort of have something to show for its passage. And this I was calling unjustified suffering, right? And I was getting really, especially sort of alongside the death of my friend, I was getting so frustrated and upset with myself for not valuing life more, and upset with myself for feeling upset about not getting through my to-do list. And then that was this pile-on suffering where I was upset with myself for experiencing what I thought was unjustified suffering. And so then that just amplified it. Like, I was so stuck in the finger trap of suffering. And so I finally kind of came to my senses, and I did something that I've been doing periodically during this time, and I've found it really helpful, so feel free to do this yourself. But before I went to bed that night, I wrote an email to my tomorrow self. And so in this email, I said, "Dear Lily," trying to remember that we are all dear. And I wrote several things that I was feeling, that I felt gratitude for, that I felt grateful for, partly just to reorient myself from a place of gratitude. And then I made myself a little to-do list, and it was a tiny to-do list, one that I could completely count on myself to accomplish. And it had things like a thank you note that I'd been intending to send. I put that on the list. And I also on the list put a task for myself, which was to sit and do nothing and just observe something for an hour. And so the next day I woke up and I got my to-do list, and it's kind of fun because sometimes in the middle of the night you've forgotten that you've sent it. So, I got mail. And so I took myself outside. It was a pretty day, and I parked my chair underneath a redbud tree, and I just sat there. And it was really quite an amazing experience, because as I'm sitting there, I'm observing so much about life that's going on all the time that I usually just miss because of how caught up I am in accomplishing stuff. And so here's what I learned. Black-capped chickadees, they seem to travel in pairs, and they love the redbud tree, and they seem to eat the blossoms off the redbud tree. Don't quote me on that, but that's what they seem to be doing. And then robins, they would come and they would scrape their beak back and forth on the branch of the tree. And I later read that some birds do that to clean, but other birds will do that to actually sharpen their beak. So I would watch the robin do that and then go and get a worm. And I had no idea that birds did that. And it went on like that. There were, a myriad things. And what happened was that as I passed that hour where I was kind of living into my greatest fear of absolutely doing nothing and accomplishing nothing, instead of feeling more tense around that, I started to just feel myself dissolve into the world around me. And I felt more and more relaxed and open, and just felt this ease in my chest and just through my whole being. And it was as though I was sort of dissolving into, I was partly a black-capped chickadee, and I was partly a blossom, and I was partly a bee. There were bees, a lot of bees. And instead of feeling more tense, I just felt this ease of sort of surrendering. And it was, that sort of loosening of the grip, and just that experience of kind of spaciousness. So That's my story, and I hope that sharing that with you will give you an invitation to just observe what it is you might be resisting and look for ways that you might be able to design some more ease around that resistance, and maybe gain some insight, or learn something about the world around you, which I did quite by accident. Um, so that's it. Thank you. I hope you, I hope you're doing okay. Bye.